The fact is, this is the starting point. This is the first part of the conversation with many more to come. We all want our communities to be safe places for us to live, to work, and raise our children and grandchildren. We want to know there will be jobs here for our children and all the LSU graduates. We want to know our coastline, our vital marshlands, our coastal industries, and other businesses are able to recover effectively from the storms today and also be able to weather harsher storms in the future.
We're coming up on the beginning of hurricane season, and every year there's a concern about how do we manage those risks, what's going to be brought to us. And especially in the coastal parishes of Louisiana, there's a strong interest in preserving our heritage, restoring the environment for future generations. Many of us that live in these communities, not me, but many who are down there, have been in these communities within probably 25 miles of each other, 3, 4, 5 generations. And they were drawn here because of the rich natural resources. They make a living here, but they love this area and want to preserve it for future generations.
To give you a little bit of background on the Louisiana Highway 1 Coalition, basically the coalition is a group of stakeholders that back in 1995, after the Deepwater Royalty Relief Act, realized there would be a huge need to upgrade LA1 because of the interest in servicing the Deepwater Gulf out of Port Fourchon, and as well as a result of really good data coming in on the rate of subsidence of Louisiana Highway 1. So the coalition is approximately 55 stakeholders, including government agencies, private individuals, and corporations that have an interest down at either Port Fourchon or our only inhabited barrier island of Grand Isle. And was formed in 1997, and this year is about 15 years old and has headed up the effort to elevate LA1. Just a little background on where LA1 is. Most of you know that, but the section of Louisiana Highway 1 that comes down the Lafourche Ridge that we are working hard to elevate is right south of the last levied community here, and this is operated by the South Lafourche Levee District. The Director Wendell is here today. And this whole discussion, I think, goes back to communities organizing themselves to be prepared for the future. And our levee district is a great example of back in the 60s getting really good businessmen on the board, going to construction way back then, and this system didn't fail the community through all of these recent storms. They've done a wonderful job. That same levee protects LA1 going up by Lafourche. Once you get south of this levee system, of course, LA1 becomes vulnerable. The road sits at about 2.5 feet above sea level, which is not much. And as most of you know, it leads to Port Fourchon at the coast of Lafourche Parish on the Gulf. And Port Fourchon supports 18% of the nation's daily energy need. It's experiencing tremendous growth at this point. There are new permits coming out. There's going to be new interest to service the Deepwater Gulf with massive quantities of materials that you need to drill 1 mile deep and then to go 2 miles below the surface of the Gulf. So think about 3 miles of pipe just for one well, and the hundreds of wells that are going to have to go in, and the materials you need to fill those pipes. So the port is going through constructing another 7,000-foot slip up here in its northern expansion. Has very good interest in its property, and we have with us today, if you would like to meet him on the break, Davey Bro sitting in the back. Davey, if you'll raise your hand. Davey's the operations director for Port Fourchon and oversees all of the construction activity down at the port. But the bottom line is, the port does rely on LA1 as its sole access road, and we're talking about 1,200 18-wheelers a day that need the port to go in and out and deliver those items that you need to have life on the outer continental shelf. Of course, LA1 is also utilized by tourists and businesses, seafood sheds, shore bases on Grand Isle, the state's only inhabited barrier island. LA1 is vital to evacuate Grand Isle, especially in the summer months when there are a tremendous amount of people down on the island. Maybe for the Tarpon Rodeo, the population can go up as high as 15 to 20,000, and you can have a storm enter the Gulf way at Cancun, and high tides are already closing LA1. So officials from the island have to work well ahead with our state officials at looking at getting people out of harm's way when storms enter the Gulf. Port Fourchon, fortunately, is built up to about 6.5-foot elevation, whereas LA1 that leads to it for that 19 miles is only at 2 feet. So, you know, the port does experience some water that comes in for storms over the docks, but it really goes away quickly, because remember that the port kind of sticks out in the Gulf. There's no friction. The water comes in and it goes away rather quickly. The friction is when that water reaches our levee system and builds up against those levees further in and stays over LA1 for a series of days. Our concern as a community is that we have a remaining 7 miles of LA1 that is vulnerable to wave action and really washout from a storm. When LA1 gets covered, it may be covered for several days, depending on how quickly the water came up and those waves are beating against that very vulnerable roadbed is our concern, because if we have wave action against a roadbed, that's when you have substantial washout that could leave you with little or no access to both Port Fourchon and Grand Isle for a matter of days. You know, really our community took a deep interest when we started having repeated storms that were closing the highway. And that's when stakeholders, including Port Fourchon, which really got the coalition going, the parish government, even the levee district, and several major operators out of Fourchon said, we really need to form an effort that's going to concentrate on getting this road funded. As all of you know, our state is overwhelmed with $12 billion of highway needs. So you need someone who is going to keep this effort on the governor's desk and keep the project moving forward. Those closures, have gone on throughout the years. If you look at the bottom of this slide, you can see that the days that the road was actually closed are increasing with these storms, because we're having a greater amount of water being caught up against the levee system, more fiercer storms at times. But look at last year, even for a mild tropical storm Lee, we had a 3-day closure of LA1. So, that was really a very light storm compared to the previous years, but a light storm like that is having this type of impact. In 2005, we brought together federal and state stakeholders, including the Louisiana DOTD and the U.S. Federal Highway Administration. We brought EPA to the table, the Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, and of course National Marine Fisheries to say, how can we, in an environmentally friendly manner, raise this infrastructure to secure access to the coast for both Port Fourchon and for Grand Isle. And in 2003, a decision came about called the Record of Decision that the federal government issues approving of the constructing of an elevated structure for 19 miles to get us down there. The project is about halfway complete. The black section here from Fouchon coming up to the Leeville community is now open, and we are trying to amass $320 million to build the project from Leeville, going north, crossing over the levee system that I talked about early here with this reg segment, and tying into a 4-lane highway that many of you have driven on when you've gone down the Grand Isle.
This represents one of the largest areas of energy infrastructure in the world, right here in coastal Louisiana. Our state literally powers our nation's economy. So let's go over, let's look at what else we have in jeopardy. This is truck traffic coming from the ports of New York, New Jersey, truck traffic coming from the ports of Long Beach, truck traffic coming from the Port of Houston. Okay? The thicker the lines, the higher the volume. There's New Orleans. All right, watch this when we take all the Louisiana ports. Okay? I mean, folks, the intermodal transportation that we have here in Louisiana, so I talked about the energy. Look at this from the intermodal transportation perspective. Louisiana, we're sitting on a gold mine, and I'd love to say it's because we're economic geniuses and Al Kubi's responsible for all this, but the reality is, that we've got this incredible advantage, these abundant natural resources in regard to all the energy we have here, the oil and the gas here. And also because of the strategic advantage we have because of the river systems. 31 states we have maritime access to through our port system. And that's why Louisiana today has 5 of the top 15 ports in the nation. That's why Louisiana today, our waterways accommodate approximately 20% of the maritime commerce in this nation. And that's why you see slides like this. So right here in this area, this incredible economic activity, this incredible nationally important area, I'm going to say it again, that energy, those energy slides you saw, how does that translate into Hurricane Katrina? 75 cents a gallon price spike nationwide, all 50 states, every consumer in the country, 75 cents a gallon. Hurricanes Gustav and Ike in 2008. How does that translate? How does all that concentration of infrastructure translate into national implications? $1.40 a gallon price spike in 2008. The largest price spike in gasoline prices since the Arab oil embargo. Well, look what happens. This shows you, since the 1930s, this precipitous drop-off of land in Louisiana, that first slide I showed, the 1,900 square miles. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like, the Gulf of Mexico coming that much closer. And we're in Baton Rouge today, and some of you are thinking, oh, that's great. We better cut the drive time to go fishing. But, I mean, folks, this is where people live. And this is all this concentration, billions and billions of dollars in infrastructure. And so I want to make note of one thing there. A lot of people are saying, oh, we're never going to be able to save this, never going to be able to restore this area, protect these communities. Look at that, 2008 up to there. That's what happens. When you make investments, that's what happens when you improve your coastal management procedures. We've been able to build and restore approximately 200 square miles of our coast. But I want to show you this. So I talked about the land loss, and I talked about all this infrastructure. This shows you over about the next 50 years how that translates into vulnerability. Take a look over on the right side of this map here. Take a look at these communities in St. Bernard and in eastern Plaquemines Parish. That is 20 to 25 feet of water above ground level in a 100-year storm. Above ground level. I mean, that's tsunami situation, except for it stays there. Look at these areas on the west bank of Plaquemines Parish coming all the way over, where are we? Terrebonne, I can't even see. All the way over to Terrebonne Parish. In fact, all the way over, coming out of Vermilion, going over all the way to the Cameron Parish line over there. That's up to, what is that, 10 to 20 feet of water. 10 to 20 feet of water. Say it again, above ground level. How do you govern a parish like that, President Randolph? I mean, that's incredible. And even these yellow colors up there, that's up to 5 feet of water in these communities, above ground level. Davey's got a port he's going to try and maintain right there. I mean, how do you do that? This shows you the trajectory our state's on. A lot of people have talked about our wetlands loss and our coastal loss in Louisiana, and have talked about, oh, that's unfortunate for the birds and the fish. Folks, this is 2 million people right there. That's what that area represents. So what we've recently done is we put together a new master plan. for coastal Louisiana. And that master plan, for the first time, let me back off that. We built upon the first master plan that was developed in 2007. That 2007 plan, done under Governor Blanco, was a fantastic piece of work, and it laid a great foundation for the future of our coastal program in Louisiana. For the first time ever, they took coastal restoration efforts, they took hurricane and flood protection efforts, they integrated them to one common plan, recognizing you have unique culture in South Louisiana, you have incredible infrastructure in Louisiana that's nationally important, and you have millions of people that live in this area. And so we took that plan, we built upon it. And for the first time ever, we've been able to integrate all of these different types of projects across the bottom of the screen there into a common plan. We literally evaluated over 400 projects, valued at over $200 billion to determine the best use of dollars. When I came in earlier, I saw a presentation up there looking at the cost to benefit of various approaches in coastal Louisiana. And restoration, it showed you the cost of benefit, and doing levees, it showed you the cost of benefit. What we did here that was a bit more specific or more prescribed than was done in that analysis is we did look at levees across the coast. But in the plan, we have identified the levee systems that have strategic alignments that provide a greater cost to benefit analysis. And I'll show you a few things here in just a minute. So the two major objectives, risk reduction or hurricane flood protection and coastal restoration, the two objectives. But we didn't do all these selections in a vacuum. We considered all of these things here, working with the communities. What's important to you? We want a shrimp. We want oysters. We want to protect our culture. We want to have alligators. Whatever it is, support for navigation. We want to have an energy industry. You got to recognize you can't have communities without employment opportunities. So we looked at all these things here, and we prioritized these in the different basins based upon feedback from the communities. For the first time ever, and this is one of the most innovative coastal plans that's ever been developed by a state in our country. We took modeling systems and integrated all 7 of these modeling systems to help us develop the best priorities for projects. So you have Project A that's a protection project, you have Project B that's a restoration project, but you only have enough money to fund one of them. Which one makes the most sense? Well, you use this model and you look at the different objectives and you determine which one has the greatest efficacy in achieving the goals. In our plan, we helped to in the development of the plan, we brought in national and international experts to have worked side by side with folks from Louisiana, with our coastal communities, and choosing the best projects and the best recommendations moving forward. Most importantly, I'm just going to zoom through this a little bit, but I want to make note here. For the first time ever, we built a plan based upon realistic resources. How much fresh water do we actually have to divert out of the Mississippi and Atchafalaya rivers to maintain the ecology of certain areas, keep fresh waters fresh, brackish, and not allow the salt water to continue encroaching upon us? How much sediment do we actually have? We can say we're going to restore everything back to the 1930s, but the reality is there's not enough sediment to do it. So we can tell these communities we're going to come restore their coast, but I'll tell you, we're not going to deliver. It's disingenuous for us to do that. So we took realistic water volumes, we took realistic sediment loads coming out of the river. The Mississippi River has between 40 and 50% of the sediment load it had historically. And we looked at funding. We can tell all the coastal communities in South Louisiana that we're going to build $200 or $300 billion worth of protection and restoration efforts. The reality is, if you look back historically, Congress has appropriated somewhere around $200 million a year. So you do the math. $200 million a year, you're going to build $300 billion worth of projects. That doesn't even cover the interest. So we built a plan based on about $50 billion over the next 50 years, a realistic funding stream that we believe we can achieve, and we certainly believe we deserve.
One of our learnings was for our key relationships that we have with our business partners, we didn't experience a lot of that. You know, they obviously had some incremental cost associated with doing their business just because of the supply and demand factors of economics. We were able to work through that, but never had to go through that period where we had that. And again, it all gets back to having know your neighbor, have those key relationships, and it helps prevent those things from occurring.
lot of folks say we can't afford to restore and protect coastal communities in Louisiana. I think the message is we can't afford not to. Looking just at Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, Congress spent $150 billion responding to those storms, and it had implications across all 50 states. And so, the message is that Louisiana is critical to the nation in terms of the services and resources we provide, and we've got to make investments to make this area more resilient, more sustainable for the long term.
We're all interested in creating prosperity, being able to make a good living, safety for our families, and quality of life for our communities to keep us living down there. But we're also facing some significant risks. We know that today. We want to be able to take a look at scenarios of the future and test ourselves against those and find out what we can do to manage risk and reduce our losses.
The thing is, this is not an energy-only initiative. It's a collaborative effort with all stakeholders. So what we're trying to accomplish here is two things. One is to help educate people on the weather risk, and also to start getting feedback from communities and other stakeholders of what we could do in terms of infrastructure investment to make our coast more resilient and able to withstand that weather risk.